everyone, and welcome to IoT Asia 2017. What we're going to talk about today is IoT's tipping point. And we all know the concept of tipping point. It's where a number of things come together, and then we initiate this action afterwards. So small things create a big impact. So we're going to get to that. But the first thing I want to do is talk about the state of IoT in Asia today. Now, we've all heard the hype. There's going to be 30 billion connected things in 2020. Or if you listen to Cisco, it's going to be 500 billion connected things by 2025. McKinsey says it's going to be up to about 11 trillion in value by 2025. But these are big numbers, and I'm not that concerned with the numbers. What I'm concerned about is how are we going to get there? So what do we have to do to actually change that? But to assess where we are today, I thought we'd look at a smart city. And the smart city I've chosen is Taipei, because Taipei is on a similar track to what we see in Singapore. It's moving on from the basic stuff around predictive maintenance, where we've connected up and we can actually monitor the equipment to make sure it works. They've done asset tracking for their different devices and equipment. They started using video surveillance, and then they moved into smart buildings so they can drive energy efficiency. Then they started doing vehicle tracking so they know where the buses are. And then they did a really interesting smart street lamp initiative last year. It helps you control the energy costs, do better security for the lighting, but it's also those base stations then in the street lamps where they're sticking their environmental sensors. And now what they've started moving to is into shared transport. And on the transport side, they started out a while ago doing shared bikes. Now they're going to be launching a shared scooter scheme and a shared car scheme. Now, why am I talking about all these things? Because I want to explain to you, this is sort of the evolutionary path. We've heard about smart cities for years. We've heard all this hype about how great it's going to be as it's changing our lives. But a lot of these things as citizens we're not going to see. And the challenge is, the real value in smart cities in the early days is much more infrastructure-centric. And then it moves towards citizen-centric. And we have to be honest, we're barely scratching the surface right now of the citizen-centric side. So there's still a lot of room for growth. There's a lot of exciting things to come up. But what we need to ask ourselves are some tough questions. We're making progress, but are we really making enough progress right now? And I'm pretty sure that everyone would agree that, well, no, we probably expected a little bit more by now. Question 2, are we learning from our mistakes? We've gone out there, a lot of projects haven't succeeded. We've seen a lot of new devices come out that have failed relatively quickly. Certain things haven't lived up to their expectation. So why aren't we learning from that and applying it? And most importantly, we need to ask ourselves, what can we as an industry do to drive IoT success? And on that, this is what I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes, because I think it all comes down to collaboration. And if you don't know this image, this is the Singapore women's expedition team that climbed Everest back in 2004. And the reason I talk about this with collaboration is I read an article about them recently. And it wasn't the physical training that they did. It was how they set up their structure internally, how they created teamwork. They agreed on shared goals. They defined roles and responsibilities and created a culture where you could question anybody on the team if you thought something was incorrect. And that type of teamwork is really collaboration. And that's what we need to see more of in the events going forward. So the first part of this, and there's going to be 3, is about internal collaboration. And it's not about just getting people to sit around the table. It's about engaging them and making sure they participate. Because IoT is more than technology. What we tend to think is, well, it's got a gadget, so I'll give it to IT and let them sort it out. And it's not that simple. Yeah, you need technology involved, but you need to have senior management buy-in to really push these initiatives forward and help create that culture. You need strategy to get involved because they're the ones who are going to define your future business plans. Operations, because it applies against the business processes. Marketing, because it's going to change your customer experience. Finance, because, let's face it, someone's got to pay the bills for this. And most importantly, the users. Now, when I look at IoT initiatives that have done very well, they've pulled together these stakeholders. When I look at the ones that have failed rather quickly, they tend to just leave it within IT. So we need to collaborate more. But that's just inside of a business. Now, what if you're actually a smart city or a smart nation like Singapore? Well, the way it's operated in Singapore, under the Smart Nation, we've had 3 main areas working on it. Under the Prime Minister's office, you have the Smart Nation Program Office, or the SNPO. Underneath the Ministry of Communications and Infrastructure, you have GovTech, which does a lot of the delivery. And then you've got another Ministry of Finance, which looks at things like the Digital Government Directive. So that's things about how do you drive security and 2-factor authentication back to the users. So yes, these groups do work together and they collaborate, but they're coming up with initiatives still independently. Now, what's interesting is last week, they've changed that. And effective May, what you're going to have is this new group set up, which is a Smart Nation and Digital Government group with a Digital Government office below it. And what I like about this is they're going to have representatives from those main players sitting in that office, starting to define the initiatives for the government. And this is good because this is collaboration internally across different government organizations. And then what you have is GovTech who can work with the group and help deliver those. This is important because what we're going to be able to do now is drive more efficiency, leverage common platforms, and start sharing data. So this is one of the better initiatives I've definitely seen around smart cities, and I can't wait to see how it gets implemented in the coming months. So how do you drive internal collaboration? Number one, identify diverse stakeholders. You don't have to be a techie to be involved in IoT. I'm not really a techie, and I love IoT. Lead by example, and this is senior management. We need people to start pushing this stuff and realizing that leveraging technology can protect you against these digital disruptors that come in, or it can streamline your business processes. Also, what you have to do is build this innovative culture, and this is the real hard part. When we set up a company or a business, we like to put rules and regulations in place. But what you want to do is create a culture where people aren't afraid to start questioning things. They're not afraid to bring up new ideas for they might get yelled at by someone above them. And this is what will really drive innovation. It's that open culture. You know, that Singapore Women's Expedition Group for Everest, 5 of them reached the top, which is far more than their goal. And they did that because they could talk to each other and they created this environment. Number 2, vendor collaboration. So the Internet of Things, if you're wondering, it's really simple. It's like a VW bug. We used to talk about it as a potato, now it's about a car. So this car, in the end, this is the solution. But it has all these different parts that come together. The tires, the rim, the drivetrain, the chassis. All these things come together to create that solution, which is the car. And that's no different than we have with IoT. We pull together different components throughout the ecosystem, from the things that capture the data, that data that goes over our different types of networks, through our platforms, to create the applications that we use to actually deliver services or initiate actions. All of it gets stored on the bottom. And then what you have going across all of this, we have to worry about security. We have to worry about the integration. How do we get these different parts coming together to actually work in this solution? And we have to manage to support these users and the solutions. Now what's interesting is there is no vendor out there that sits in all these spaces. So if you're a vendor, what you need to do is start collaborating more and find partners that will strengthen your offering. If you're a customer and you have technology vendors coming in and they say, I've got a widget that sits here, ask them where the rest of these pieces are. Because if not, they're just bringing you a piece of technology. They're not going to bring you a solution. So what should the vendors do? Number 1, define your role in that ecosystem. Where are your gaps? Who should your partners be? Identify the IoT decision makers in the companies. And this is a real tricky one for vendors right now. A lot of the people making IoT decisions sit in the lines of business. And they don't normally buy technology products. So even though you might be a very big ICT vendor, the real decision makers don't buy from you. They buy from the operational technology companies like Bosch or Honeywell or GE. So you got to find out who those people are buying from and partner with them. And when you just start partnering these things, you strengthen your whole go-to-market. It's tough for some of these big vendors to realize you're not going to be fronting the deal. You're going to be in the back end, but that might be where your gateway or server sits. So you have to do this to partner. Final one, the fun stuff, data collaboration. Everyone loves data. We're connecting things from all these different sensors. And what I'm going to show you now is my favorite example about data collaboration I've ever seen. So everyone knows the company Under Armour. It's a sports apparel business. They sell running clothes, other sports clothes, sports equipment. In 2015, they went out and acquired 3 companies, Endomondo, MapMyFitness, and MyFitnessPal. Those people, those companies, had 121 million users who used wearables, trackers or smartwatches. Now, that doesn't sound exciting until you think about why they did it. If I'm Under Armour and I just want to market in Singapore, I have to think, okay, there's a population, I assume this many runners, and they just do blanket advertising to try and reach that user base. With this type of information, they go from having a market of millions to a market of 1, because they actually know that what I'm doing, what sports I'm playing, how I'm performing, and it becomes really interesting because creating that direct customer relationship, it changes the whole business model. Before, they were 5, 6 levels removed from the customer. Now they have a 1-to-1 level for the customer. So fast forward 12 months. A friend of mine is going running in Copenhagen. He's got his wearable on. He uses Endomondo. That shared the information to Under Armour. Under Armour said, you know what? I'm going to pull in the weather information. And then they sent him an email that day that said, today was the coldest day of the year in Copenhagen. Were you prepared? Check out our latest running gear. Now, this isn't a future. You can see, this is the past. This was last winter. They were already able to do this. Now, this is the types of things we can do with data. We don't have to look at it logically. Pull in other tertiary data sources to try and create these solutions. So what I'm trying to say is collaboration drives the IoT ecosystem. You know, we always have our technology components, but we also have to think about as the solutions and people. And these are the components I'm talking about. That internal side, who should we be partnering with? How do we enable our teams to actually participate? The vendors, how do you pull together multiple technologies to create that solution that leverages the data?